Hi, welcome to this webinar between PIAS and the local authority on Plymouth's graduated approach and local offer. So I'd like to introduce Lisa and Carla from the local authority who will talk you through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. In this short video, we will explain the graduated approach and we'll also be talking about the framework as well. So first of all, I will start by explaining some of the school's statutory duties, and then hopefully that will give you a little bit of context around the graduated approach as well. So there are some key documents that might be of interest for you. So we have the Children and Families Act, which is the key legislation. And then you also have the Code of Practice, which is the statutory guidance. So what we have on this slide is a number of different statutory responsibilities that schools have to adhere to. And some of the statutory responsibilities are musts and some of them are shoulds. So the Code of Practice is a huge document with lots of different chapters. So chapter 6 is the kind of key section that schools will adhere to. So at the top there, we have a should. So schools should have a member of a governing body to oversee SEN. Schools must ensure that a SENCO is fully qualified. So from 2009, any new SENCOs that are new to post must ensure that they have the mandatory master's level National Award for SEN coordination. Schools must publish an SEN information report and link it to the local offer. So this is an accessible document that's easy to find on their websites, and it must involve a number of different things that they must adhere to, and it should also involve some co-production from yourselves as well. Schools must inform families when they're making special educational provision for a child. Schools must ensure that children and young people with SEN engage in the activities of the school alongside pupils who do not have SEN. So that's part of their accessibility duties. I've also popped in there person-centred approach. So this is around the Code of Practice again. So all principles within the Code of Practice are designed to support participation, co-production of children and families in decision making. So that's why I popped that one in. There's also the reasonable adjustment duty. So schools must comply with the reasonable adjustment duty from the Equality Act 2010 for children with disabilities. And schools must use their best endeavours when planning provision for children with SEN. So that's like duty around removing barriers to learning. So what we have on this slide here is this is around the graduated approach now. So if you can see at the bottom of the slide there, all children have access to high quality teaching. So all teachers are teachers of children with SEN, and all children will have that high quality teaching in the classroom. And there could be a number of different access strategies that children will have access to in the classroom. Some children will have targeted support. So this could mean that they might have some additional intervention inside or outside of the classroom to meet those targets that they have. And then finally, at the end of the slide there, some children will be SEN support. And that could mean that a number of different assessments have been made, conversations would have been had with yourselves, and it could also mean that maybe some outside agencies have been involved as well, but possibly not. And any additional from or different to or additional from provision will then be in place to ensure that they're SEN support. At this point, you will definitely be involved if the child has been put onto the SEN register in school. Above there on the slide as well, we have the assess, plan, do, review cycle. This has come from the Code of Practice. So what your classroom teacher will be doing in conversation with you, and also the SENCO will be involved, is they will be making those decisions around that assess, plan, do, review cycle. This informs the graduated approach. So they'll be making assessments, they'll be planning, they'll be doing that planning, and they'll be reviewing that planning. So what we have here is the graduated approach framework. This is based on the original Devon model, but adapted for Plymouth. And it was written for leaders, but used in co-production with families. So the framework was developed in collaboration with a range of professionals and families. And it was launched in March 2020, just around the time when COVID hit. So we've been doing a number of soft launches ever since. There are two frameworks. There's one for early years, which is a slightly more simplified framework, which comes in one part, and there's one for schools, which comes in two parts. It's an electronic tool and it's used for school teachers and leaders to use. But again, as I said, it's used alongside yourselves. It's an electronic framework which is used to support identification, planning and recording of appropriate support, and guidance and reviewing. So it's kind of an all-in-one tool. It's important that the framework is used as part of assess, plan to review cycle. So that cycle that I showed you on the last slide. And early support is offered as part of the school's universal offer through that graduated approach of need. The framework does a number of different things. So it's also designed to help educational settings and schools to understand and meet their duties across a range of legislation and guidance. It's there to support families and young people to understand how educational settings offer support. So it's there to really support yourselves as well. It's there to support professionals in healthcare and voluntary sector to signpost families and young people to the support they need. So for example, at the bottom of the document, there are a number of lists of different signposting to different agencies and professionals. And it's there to help support staff, particularly SENCOs and also wider leader teams and class teachers to understand the common approach to meeting needs across the city. So it's about everybody using the graduated approach, talking about the framework, and everybody singing off the same hymn sheet. So the framework comes in two parts. So this is the school framework now that we're talking about. So part one supports schools and settings with the identification of vulnerable pupils and those pupils with SEND. So part one has a number of different tools that we'll be talking about in more detail in just a second. And then part two supports schools in that planning to meet the needs that you've already identified in part one, but also signposts you to appropriate resources and websites as well.
So the graduated approach can be found on the Plymouth City Council local offer. If you type into the search bar graduated approach, then it will come up. We are developing this page at the moment, so you might see some variations to what you can see on the screen, but we are looking to include the flowchart that we will show you in a second onto the screen, so you will be able to see the process of what the graduated approach looks like for you and your child as you go through. So this is the process, put in a flowchart document, because the actual document itself is about 100 pages long. So it is quite a lengthy document because of the amount of support tools that are put in place in order to assess, review and gain that bigger picture of the child. So the first part of it, the assess part one, this is where the school or the parents are identifying that need. So the class teacher or SENCO would complete an assessment checklist. And again, I will show you what that looks like in a second. And links to the documents are on the local offer as well. So they would look at the assessment checklist and then they would look at the quick checker and the quick checker summary. So these documents would be given to the families. So everybody is on the same hymn sheet as to what the areas of the need are for the child and how they're going to identify those needs moving forward. So the broad areas of concern would be identified. The SENCO member of staff or class teacher will complete the relevant SEN code of practice indicators and corresponding record of assessment sections. So for instance, if the child has a communication interaction need, that code of practice indicators would be completed, and then a record of assessments of what information gathering the school has done in order to see where the child is at that point of time. Then the SENCO and the member of staff or class teacher would complete the summary of priority areas of need. So again, they would be ranking those 4 areas to see which one is, or which areas are the most important to be focused on. The SENCO member of staff or class teacher will arrange another meeting with the parents and carers so that all information can be shared and the planned and review cycle can then begin. So this is some of the documents that I've just mentioned. So this would be the quick checker and the graduated approach to inclusion. So as you can see, the different areas, communication, interaction, cognition and learning, social, emotional, mental health and sensory and physical. So it is a quick checker for class teachers, SENCOs or leaders to be able to observe the child in their setting and see what areas of need that the child presents. And then they would complete this quick checker summary. So again, looking at those different areas and then dating and commenting on areas of concern that they've viewed. This is the assessment checklist. So in order to identify a child or young people with SEN, there's a few different things that needs to happen. So discussion with the pupil's parents, carers to establish their views and experience of the pupil and their needs. So again, they might present different needs at home. And this is where working in collaboration with parents is really important. Discussion with the child or young person. So again, it's establishing their views, what they consider their strengths and areas of development. It's really important to have everyone's voice involved. And if applicable, a discussion with any outside practitioners, so any other agencies that may be involved at that stage. Then we'd be looking at the teacher assessment, so looking at the teacher's knowledge and experience for the pupil, and then an analysis of progress in comparison to the pupil's peers, for looking at school data, national data and expectations. And this is part of that plan, do, review cycle, making sure that, it's true identification and early help of that child. So this is what the SEND indicators look like. So again, this is just for communication interaction. There's one for each area of need. So class teachers, SENCOs or leaders would use this when observing children to really think about, if those particular things are seen all of the time, occasionally, frequently, or if it's quite a specialist thing. Okay, so they would really use this to really pinpoint and narrow down what it is that needs to be intervened with. Here's an example of the record of assessment. So again, any sort of baselining or testing or interventions that the schools are putting in place, they would record this here, they would record the date, and then they would record what they would see within that child and within that assessments as well. This also helps them to baseline against other children to see, how they're kind of responding in terms of the rest of the class, children in that class as well. This and then takes us on to the plan, do and review section. So the SENCO would then explore the provision banks relevant to the children's needs. And this can be done at 3 levels. So there's a universal level, which is the school-based provision checklist to support best practice. The targeted level, which is a school-based provision checklist as part of an outcome-based plan. And then there's a specialist provision as part of an outcome-based plan or an EHCP. So most children be supported using the universal or targeted, but some children may need to go down to that specialist provision as well. So again, going on to the SEND indicators. So we've already discussed this, and there's one in the EYFS assessment indicators as well, if needed. And then the summary of priority areas of need. So practitioners would and class teachers or SENCOs would really look at the specific area of need, identify and comment on the impact of learning, and then rank that in priority so we can really focus on, what intervention is needed at what stage. So going through to the next stage, so then the SENCO would complete the universal provision checklist for the identified area of need. So they wouldn't need to do all 4 of these areas. They would just do the checklist that is required for that child. And then universal approaches are put in place and reviewed regularly. It might be after a review meeting with yourselves and the child that they've made appropriate progress and they no longer need further additional support. So then, therefore, that's where that's reviewed, and then the intervention can come to a close because the intervention has worked. It might be that it's not worked and it's not had the desired effect, and we do need to go down to the targeted support. So after a review of the support, despite the universal and individual support, there are persistent difficulties in that area of need. So they may involve external professionals through consultation. So then they would complete the targeted area. So then you've got the communication, cognition, social and sensory checklists for that targeted area. So again, after review, the child might have, after the targeted support, they may have made really good progress, and then that's, they can go back to the universal or even have their intervention ceased, or it might be that they still need additional support. So here's just an overview of what the universal provision checklist might look like, and you can find this on the local offer as well. and then the targeted provision bank. So again, these are the sorts of things that the teachers will be looking for when working with the children. And again, you can access these as well, so you can have a look at this for maybe when the children are at home, and see if you can see some of these things maybe when they're at home as well. So that can be found on the local offer. So when the schools are planning a review, it's essential that the progress of the pupil is identified, and the education practitioners should meet with the parents and carers and hold a formal review at least 3 times a year. It should be combined with the usual cycle of discussion with parents, carers of all pupils, so maybe during parents' evening, and it's led by a member of staff that knows the pupils. They allow sufficient time to gather the parent carer views and agree a new plan and include the views of the pupil. There must be recorded and a copy made available to parent carers in a timely manner, and utilise a clear recording mechanism for evaluation and monitoring purposes. So again, 2 weeks before the review, the school is meant to check the parents, carers can still attend, explain the purpose of the meeting to the pupil and gather their views, repeat assessments or carry out new ones, and ensure an appropriate space is available for the meeting. And then the day before the review, remind the pupil that the meeting has taken place, gather the paperwork and ensure the appropriate recording paperwork is prepared for the meeting. And you should have had all of the paperwork before the meeting as well, so you know exactly what you're going to be discussing when you go into that review meeting. Again, it might be that over time, professional advice has been followed and implemented and appropriate progress has still not been seen. There's still persistent and ongoing difficulties and are impacting on school and home life despite the interventions. And there may be significant gaps in achievement with an uneven profile. So the child will need to require a high level of support to maintain appropriate attention and focus and understand those social norms. The involvement of external professionals will be indicated through consultation. So the SENCO would need to complete the specialist provision checklist. So again, there's the specialist checklist for each of those areas of need. And then again, we need some time for the child to be able to use these interventions, do that in school, and then monitor the progress as we go through. So after review again, the child may have made adequate progress and may no longer need that additional support. If they haven't made that sufficient progress, this is where the school and the parents would be looking to put an EHCP statutory assessment in place, and this would be recommended by external professionals as well as that team approach if the child has still not made progress and still showing that they are unable to access the curriculum. So again, here's an example of what that might look like for that checklist, for the specialist checklist. So just to sum up, I know that's lots of information to take on board, but you can have a look at the graduated approach in your own time. So if you go onto the Plymouth local offer, this is what it looks like, and then you would click into the area that the category that your child fits into. And then when you get into the actual local offer, you will see a search bar. So if you just wanted to go to the graduated approach, if you type in graduated approach and it's found within the SENCO guide, you can then see the graduated approach and also the relevant documentation that goes with it as well. So you are aware of all of those checklists and can go into meetings really armed with the information that you need when talking about your child.
And on this slide, we've just added some extra links for you as well. So at the top there, the top link takes you straight into the graduated approach, so you don't have to go searching for it. Underneath, I've popped a link to the dyslexia best practice guidance because that's a really handy guide if you think your child has dyslexic tendencies. 2 links that you're probably already aware of there. We have a link to PIAS, of course, and then Plymouth Parent Carer Voice. And at the bottom is the link to the Plymouth local offer again for you. And that's the end of our presentation. So thank you for listening today.